It was a Tuesday afternoon when Elon Musk went to order a Taco Bell meal, but he stopped cold after hearing two boys whisper something crazy behind him. For Elon, this Tuesday felt endless meetings stretched on, emails piled up, and big decisions loomed over his head like storm clouds. Even Elon found himself needing a moment to step away from it all. And that day, he had a strange urge that pulled him in a direction he hadn't planned for: fast food. Not just any fast food, either something specific, something a bit indulgent. Taco Bell. It seemed ridiculous. There was something about it, something nostalgic, maybe that made him feel like just a regular person for a few minutes. It reminded him of his early days, long before the billions, long before Tesla, and long before rockets were flying into space under his watch. Back then, he wasn't all that different from any other young guy trying to figure out life, grabbing quick meals between coding marathons and engineering projects. Without giving it too much thought, he hopped into his Tesla and drove to the nearest Taco Bell. It wasn't far from his current location, a typical suburban spot tucked between a convenience store and a strip mall. It was the kind of place where no one would expect to see a billionaire casually strolling in for a quick bite. That's exactly what Elon liked about it. As his Tesla silently glided into the parking lot, Elon caught himself chuckling. He stepped out of the car, looking more like an ordinary guy than the titan of industry he was. Dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans, Elon wasn't the eccentric billionaire most people expected. As he walked into the restaurant, the familiar bell above the door chimed. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect from any Taco Bell. A few customers sitting at booths, the smell of seasoned beef and cheese hanging in the air, and the hum of a soda machine in the background. No one seemed to notice him as he stepped inside, not yet, at least. He approached the counter and gave the menu a quick glance, already knowing what he wanted. Before he could place his order, the cashier behind the counter did a double take. She knew that face, and for a second, she froze, unsure if she was seeing things. It wasn't every day that the guy behind SpaceX and Tesla walked into your Taco Bell after all, but she managed to keep it together, giving him a nervous smile. "Hiya, welcome to Taco Bell. What can I get for you?" she said nervously. Elon, noticing, gave her a small, reassuring smile in return. He wasn't in the mood for any kind of attention, just food. "I'll have 2 Crunchwrap Supremes," he said simply. The cashier punched in the order, trying to act normal, though the entire interaction felt surreal to her. She handed him his receipt and told him it would be just a few minutes. As Elon waited, he did what most people do when they're trying to pass the time. He let his mind wander. He noticed a few customers coming and going, but none seemed to recognize him. He appreciated the anonymity. For someone constantly in the spotlight, it was rare to have a moment of peace in public. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. But it was after he finished ordering his Taco Bell meal that he stopped cold. Why? Because he heard 2 boys talking about something that went beyond even Elon's wildest dreams. He stood frozen for a moment, the words from the boys' conversation drifting into his consciousness. His hand hovered over the counter as he reached for his wallet, but something in their tone made him pause. At first, he had barely paid attention, assuming it was just the usual chatter of teenagers. But now, their voices took on a different weight. He turned his head slightly, just enough to hear them more clearly without making it obvious that he was listening. One of the boys, his voice barely more than a whisper, was speaking rapidly, trying to keep his excitement and nerves in check. "We have to do it tonight," the boy said urgently. "If we don't, Mom's not going to get better." Elon blinked, his focus sharpening. He hadn't expected to hear that. The other boy, his brother, apparently, responded quieter this time. "But what if we get caught? You know what they do to people who steal. It'll make everything worse." Steal. The word hit Elon like a punch. He glanced over more directly now, and from his new angle, he could see them better. They were just kids. They couldn't have been more than 13 or 14 years old. There they sat, hunched over their table as though carrying the weight of something far too heavy for their small shoulders. The older boy, clearly the leader, leaned in closer to his brother. It's just the cash from the register. No one will know. We need it. And I don't know how else we can get the money. Asterisk money and time asterisk Ellen's mind raced. This wasn't the usual kind of mischief that teenagers get into. This was different. He could feel the desperation in the older boy's voice. They were scared, and they were considering doing something that could ruin their lives forever. The cashier handed Elon his food, and he nodded absent-mindedly, not really paying attention. His focus was entirely on the two boys now, trying to piece together their conversation. The younger boy's voice wavered. I don't want to do this. What if someone gets hurt? The older one took a deep breath. We'll be fast, in and out. No one gets hurt, I promise. We'll just grab the cash, and then we'll have enough to pay for the medicine. Their mother wasn't just sick. She needed medicine, and fast. Ellen felt a tug deep in his chest, an emotion he didn't often acknowledge, empathy. He stood there for a few seconds, processing everything. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just walk out and pretend he hadn't heard. He turned back toward the cashier and quickly made a decision. Hey, can you do me a favor? He asked, his voice low. The cashier blinked at him, confused, but willing to help. Could you add 2 more crunch wraps to my order? I'll pay for them now. The cashier nodded, her hands moving quickly to punch in the order. As she did, Ellen turned to the boys, taking a deep breath. With his bag in hand and a calm expression, he made his way toward their table. Ellen smiled gently, doing his best to seem non-threatening. Hey, guys, he said casually, holding up the bag. Mind if I sit here for a second? I ordered a bit too much food, and I thought you might want to help me out with these crunch wraps. Sure, the older boy said, but his voice was clearly uncertain. Ellen sat down across from them, setting the bag on the table and pulling out the extra crunch wraps. He placed one in front of each boy. He let them unwrap their food before saying anything else. His calm, measured approach seemed to work as the boys slowly took a few bites, though their nerves were still visible. So, Ellen started, his voice still casual. I couldn't help but overhear a bit of your conversation. Sounds like you guys are dealing with something pretty tough. The boys froze mid-bite. Their faces paled, and the older one immediately went defensive. We weren't doing anything wrong, he said quickly, his voice tight. We were just talking, that's all. Ellen nodded, still calm. I get it. You're not in trouble. I just want to help. I heard you mention your mom. She's sick, right? Yeah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She's really sick. She needs this medicine, and we don't have the money. We've tried everything. Ellen's heart clenched. These kids were barely teenagers, yet here they were, carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, trying to find a way to save their mom. They were desperate and terrified. Ellen took a deep breath, knowing he had to tread carefully. I can help, he said softly. I've been lucky in life. I've built businesses, sure, but I've also seen how hard it can be for people, how it feels to be desperate and out of options. Let me help you. Let me help your mom. The boys looked at him in disbelief. They couldn't process what he was saying. Why would Elon Musk, the man of the moment, want to help them? You're serious? The older boy asked. Ellen nodded. Completely. Look, you don't have to go through this alone. There are ways to get help without putting yourselves or your future at risk. I can help cover the medical costs and get your mom the medicine she needs. You don't need to steal. You don't need to carry this weight by yourselves. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. The boys stared at Elon, their eyes wide with hope and disbelief. Slowly, the older boy's shoulders sagged as the weight of his burden began to lift, even if just a little. You'd really do that? The younger boy finally asked. You'd help us. Ellen smiled warmly. Yeah, I'd really do that. And you know what? I don't want anything in return. I just want you to keep doing what you're doing, taking care of each other, taking care of your mom. That's all that matters. The older boy's lip trembled, and for the first time since Elon had approached them, he let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," he whispered, the tears finally spilling over. Elon reached across the table and gave the boy's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly. "We'll figure this out together. And do you know any other heartwarming stories like this? If you do, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below."